Buddhism is concerned with solving the problem of suffering. So the first axiom is always, we don't want to suffer. Well, here already I have problems. I think if there is a point of psychoanalysis, it's that we want to suffer. So what I want to say is that my first point is that Buddhism is here way too optimistic in a way, in this belief, that all living beings want to get rid of suffering and so on. I doubt it. Second point, I think one of the mystifications of our Western perception of Buddhism is that we identify too much with meditation. In a very good book on reality of Buddhism, I read, it's very interesting that in countries like Thailand, blah, blah, Burma, where Myanmar now, where Buddhism is really a way of life, only a tiny minority meditates. It's not so much, meditation is more an ideal. It's like to remind you that it is possible to reach, but for a large majority of people, being a Buddhist simply means don't cause too much suffering and so on, all that stuff. Okay, but let's go on now where I see a problem with Buddhism. Again, it's what I already mentioned. Buddhism begins with suffering. So then you slowly train yourself ethically and so on. At the end, you step out of this wheel of desire. You are no longer controlled by karma. Your acts no longer leave traces. You don't hurt other people, and so on and so on. Here, I have a couple of problems, and okay, I don't have time to go now in detail in them, but I had big debates with Buddhists who, at least, maybe they pretend that this, I don't know, conceded to me that there is a problem here. Namely, did you notice this radical ambiguity in Buddhism? How, when they talk about reaching enlightenment, they oscillate between two extremes. On the one hand, the idea is enlightenment is simply a radical shift in your self-experience. Enlightenment doesn't mean anything changes in the world. It means just you radically shift your attitude. You no longer believe that you are a substantial agent, free will, and so on. Just this. You accept the void. On the other hand, you have a much more radical tendency that living as such is suffering, and that basically that's the idea of bodhisattva, the Buddhist saint, who refuses to enter nirvana, but although he entered nirvana, he comes back to our illusory reality, he postpones his own salvation till all living sentient beings will be saved, and so on and so on. I think, if you ask me, the origin of all the problems with Buddhism is bodhisattva. This very noble, apparently, idea of I could be there, could have been there in nirvana, but I have such loving sympathy for the suffering of all living beings that I came back so that only we all together should join it. The problem here is, I think here already the battle is lost, because, authentic Buddhism for me means that in nirvana you don't go somewhere else. You stay fully here. And you can even be active as such. For an authentic radical Buddhist, you can, when you are in nirvana, you should forget, this is already, I think, a falsification. This idea that in nirvana you are somewhere there in a trance. No, you are here with all the people, just with a different attitude, but you can be fully active here. Now, the problem, of course, is if you accept this position, what does it mean ethically? Again, I claim there is, the problem that I already approached, there is no guarantee that horrible thing cannot happen. Like, this was a big shock of me. I read 2-3 books on. If there is a nightmare of a human person, this is Pol Pot. You remember, the leader of Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. Well, all descriptions agree that there was even a myth within the Khmer Rouge that he reached the highest enlightenment. He was an incredibly gentle, soft person, always inner peace, and so on and so on. So what I'm trying to say here, again, what I'm trying to say is that there is nothing which prevents you from reaching inner enlightenment and go on doing horrible things. Now you will say compassion, but is not the basic Buddhist attitude that of compassion with all suffering beings and so on and so on. But let me assure you, this problem was solved long ago with the wonderful notion of compassionate war. You know, like you can do all the killing, but with compassion and so on and so on. Then you have another problem here, which I think makes it even more. Many Buddhists admit that you can reach something like nirvana also through biochemical means, with simple chemical intervention. You don't need to go through all the meditation, blah, blah, blah. So the problem is, doesn't this undermine the ethical status of meditation? That is to say, is there a distinction between, let's say, real enlightenment where you meditated, worked hardly to reach it, and simply taking a pill and finding yourself in a blessed state? Owen Flanagan, a cognitivist who is also close to Buddhism, proposed what he calls here a normative exclusion cause. I quote him: cases where happiness in the sense of Buddhist enlightenment, is gained by magic pills or is due to false belief do not count, because the allegedly happy person must be involved in cultivating her own virtue and happiness. Happy states born of delusion are undeserved. My point is why? Why, if, as he admits it, it's exactly the same inner state? Okay, then the next, so again, because of all this, here is the quote from Suzuki, if you don't believe me. It is really not he, the killer, but the sword itself that does the killing. He, the killer, had no desire to do harm to anybody, but the enemy appears and makes himself a victim. It is as though the sword performs automatically its function of justice, which is the function of mercy. Wonderful description of killing, and so on and so on. So, you know what I'm trying to say here? Now, really to conclude, I was too long. Two things. First, don't misunderstand me. I am not dismissing Buddhism in any way. It's an absolutely authentic experience. I just claim it doesn't have a necessary immanent, let's call it moral or whatever, content. Let's not cheat here. It's, as Suzuki said, a technique of achieving inner peace. You can do all the torturing you want. I don't believe, and it's quite interesting to read. For example, I have a book on Tibetan legal system, where it describes in what wonderful way, wonderful in a terrifying sense, in what wonderful way, although they did not do the killing, they nonetheless did it. For example, in traditional Tibetan justice, of course, you don't do the killing, life is sacred. But they whipped a criminal and chained him in winter to a tree outside, so he wrote, and so on and so on. You can do it. So what I want to say is that my lesson would be just double. First, let's accept the gap. Inner Buddhist peace meditation is a great thing, but it's not the answer. I think we should, again, maintain a minimal gap between inner authenticity and, let's call it, ethics of acting together with other people, and so on and so on. My second conclusion here would have been that that to locate what really, I'm sorry, I'm talking in mega generalities now, what really divides East from West, if I may use these terms, probably in a wrong way, but nonetheless, is that what nonetheless I find attractive in Western tradition, it's terribly politically incorrect what I'm saying now, it's that in contrast to this idea, don't get involved, maintain an inner distance, isn't the entire Western ethics, starting with Plato, precisely an ethics of falling into, opening yourself to an encounter, like falling in love. Our Western love is not this peaceful Buddha smile. It's out there, something, and you fall fully into it. You know, this idea of Gilbert Keith Chesterton, my favorite Catholic theologist, although I'm totally an atheist, of course, puts this nicely when he says that in all other religions, you have a fall, like man falls from God. Only in Christianity, God himself falls into the world, incarnation, and so on and so on. So what I'm saying is that what I am tempted to do here, but even here, I'm not sure if maybe some Buddhisms can do it. It's a very tricky point. It's, you know, at least I'm totally opposed to Star Wars Buddhism. I will stop immediately. To Star Wars Buddhism, you know, which is, you know, how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader by getting too identified, too much love. No, I mean, my friend Kojin Karatani, a Japanese leftist, told me that there is nonetheless a Buddhist tradition which says, no, nirvana does not mean maintain inner distance. Nirvana means fall fully into the world. In the sense of fall without reserve. You lose your ego, not by some inner meditation, but precisely you lose your ego by falling radically into the world, accepting fully the world. And even, okay, I should maybe have stopped here, but my basic message again would have been that, that maybe here there is an irreducible ethical line of division, of how I'm tempted to claim that what we need precisely today, when a kind of a false Buddhism is becoming generally accepted ontology, is precisely to advocate the fall. Not wise distance, not like engage yourself fully, step out of yourself, fall into it. I think this is, for me, the ethics that we need today. I'm very sorry I was too long, and I improvised it because this is part of the